When my cousin Cody and I were in our early 20s, we went on a handful of camping trips around Colorado. This happened when I was 22 and he was 23. It took place in Uprow Forest. It was my first time camping there, but not Cody's. Since our jobs allowed us to have days off in the middle of the week, we often went on these trips then to avoid traffic and crowds. I always let Cody take charge on these trips. He's the Eagle Scout, not me. We parked by a picnic area and stepped into the woods. After about 15 minutes of hiking deeper in, we found a good spot to set up camp. By good spot, I mean a clearing big enough for 2 tents, a portable stove, and a campfire. The first thing we did was unpack our stuff and set up our tents. Cody has always been much faster than me at pitching a tent. He could do it in just a few minutes, while it would always take me over 20, or at least it did, since I hadn't camped in the wilderness for years. Next, we created a ring of stones for a fire and gathered sticks and wood. Cody had brought some fire starter and a lighter, so we kind of cheated, but oh well. By the time the sun was going down, we had a fire going, and Cody started cooking steaks and burgers. One thing about Cody is that he always goes all out with the food, and he's a really good cook. I trusted him completely with feeding us. Of course, we had our bear spray in case the smell of the food would attract a black bear. Cody always said that was very unlikely. He also said that the real thing to worry about in the middle of the woods was other people. As we ate our steaks and burgers, we cracked open some beers and played classic rock on the speaker. If you've never been camping, you don't understand how good the vibe is. Sitting there in the wilderness with a friend or family member, some beers, reminiscing, and vibing to music. As it got dark, we started playing card games on the small folding table we had brought specifically for cards. After playing traditional card games, we started playing Uno. That's when we heard something in the woods. I paused the music on my phone, letting the forest go silent, and we clearly heard a person humming and footsteps coming from beyond the trees. Cody urged me to grab the flashlight. I tried, but by the time I found it, the sounds had already faded. I asked Cody if this was something to worry about, and he said it was unusual. Someone being this deep in the woods, let alone walking near our campsite, humming at the same time, was definitely not normal. I was shaken, and I could tell Cody was too. We went back to playing cards, keeping the music much lower. Then, out of nowhere, a big stick landed in the middle of our campsite. It didn't fall from a tree, it was thrown at us. Cody started yelling something like, "Whoever's out there messing with us, get a life and leave." Footsteps could be heard retreating into the distance. I suggested we pack up and move somewhere else, but Cody said absolutely not. In the dark, we were better off staying put. We both had bear spray, which he advised I keep next to me in my tent when we went to sleep. It was the closest thing to a ranged self-defense weapon that we had. Throughout the night, we kept hearing sounds of branches cracking in the distance, sounds no animal should be making. It was clear someone, maybe multiple people, was out there. Eventually, we decided to sleep, but agreed to take turns keeping watch. Cody went first, reading his book, while I crawled into my sleeping bag. Waking up in the middle of the night is normal when camping. You're cold, uncomfortable, and any little noise can wake you. But I wasn't prepared for what I saw. A head was peering into my tent. It looked like Cody at first, so I said groggily, "Is it my turn?" The head didn't move, and the zipper of the tent quickly zipped up. Then it disappeared.
I shot upright and listened as footsteps walked away. I called Cody's name, no answer. I unzipped my tent to peek out, but the fire was dead and Cody wasn't outside. I ran over to his tent, unzipped it, and found him fast asleep in his sleeping bag. Goosebumps ran through me. I shook him awake and told him someone had been at our campsite.
Cody realized he must have dozed off while reading. He suggested I sleep in his tent with him so I could stay safe. As I grabbed my sleeping bag, we heard that humming again from outside. We both got inside Cody's tent and zipped up, cans of bear spray by our sides. I wanted nothing more than for a bear to come and save the day. The hours dragged on. Over 3 long, horrible hours, we switched watch. When Cody woke me, it was almost dawn. We packed up everything, hiked back to the car in plenty of light, and drove home. Neither of us felt like camping anymore. It's been 6 years since this happened, and Cody has asked me to go camping a few times since, but I have no interest. People can be scarier than ghosts. That night, someone was out there, watching, and the sight of that head looking into my tent, it was straight out of a nightmare. It was after my father passed away, and I inherited his cabin up in Oregon near Mount Bachelor. The cabin had been put up for sale because my mom could no longer afford the payments, and renting it out wasn't covering the costs either. For that month, the cabin would be vacant, and I saw it as a chance to get away, clear my head, and escape everything that had been happening in my life. I packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog, Midnight, and headed up in my dad's car. The first 2 days were normal, nothing out of the ordinary. I spent my days playing with Midnight in the snow and snowboarding, and the evenings playing PlayStation, listening to music, drinking, and smoking out on the balcony. I'd stocked up on food, cigarettes, and liquor, so I was pretty much set, aside from occasional trips to the slopes. I felt content, relaxed even, despite all the recent drama. The cabin was 2 stories. The bottom had the living room, a small kitchen, and a side guest bedroom. Upstairs were 2 rooms, including the master bedroom with a walkout balcony. Most of my time was spent either in the living room, the kitchen, or the master bedroom. I never ventured into the other rooms, always keeping the doors shut. By the 3rd day, things started getting a little weird. There were only 2 other cabins nearby, maybe a block away from each other, and the rest were at least a mile away. Most surrounding areas were dense forest and tall pine trees. Both neighboring cabins were empty, and I knew nobody else was staying there. Around midday, I noticed footprints in the snow surrounding the cabin. They looked semi-fresh, like someone had just walked there 20 or 30 minutes prior. I thought maybe someone was staying in the neighboring cabin and I hadn't noticed. Maybe someone like me, alone. The footprints led into the denser trees and disappeared. I disregarded them and went back. That night, as I lay in bed with Midnight, he perked up suddenly, ears alert, and jumped off the bed, running downstairs. I froze in bed, listening. Footsteps moved back and forth. After 5 minutes, Midnight returned, doing his little dance, signaling he needed to go out. I took him outside, but he wasn't interested in peeing. He pulled on the leash, staring into the woods and sniffing around the house, looking up at the roof. I realized he was sensing something unusual. I pulled him back inside, but half an hour later, I heard footsteps on the roof. Not random small noises,
but spaced like human steps. Midnight barked lightly. I grabbed my coat, shoes, flashlight, and a cigarette and went out onto the balcony. The roof was empty, snow undisturbed. I tried to convince myself it was all imagination, but my instincts screamed otherwise. Then I saw it. In a tree, about 20 feet from the balcony, crouched between two branches, a tall, skinny, humanoid figure. It was freakishly tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet, with unnaturally long white arms hanging from the branches above. Its mouth was wide open, expressionless. I froze. Midnight stood alert behind me, growling softly. I didn't move, slowly backing into the cabin, pulling Midnight with me. I locked the door and shone the light toward the tree, but nothing was there. Curtains closed, I retreated to bed. Hours later, I heard light tapping on the balcony door, consistent for nearly an hour. Midnight wouldn't go near it. It felt like someone was inviting me to open it. I kept hearing my father's voice in my head, warning me to stay put. I obeyed. Eventually, dawn broke. I packed up and left the cabin. I didn't go snowboarding that day. I just wanted the safety of being away from that place.
I was searching Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace for a new phone. This was a long time ago, so it had to be like an iPhone 7 even or something. Still had the home buttons back then. I found this listing for a phone. It was some generic-looking post. iPhone whatever for sale, new, around $300. It was a really, really good deal for the time. I remember he told me all the small details I needed to know, that it was factory unlocked, never opened, and stuff like that. He sent me a video of the box too, still sealed. The guy, whose name was Melvin, seemed nice and easy to talk to over text. I got his number and we discussed a pickup point. His location on the Facebook ad was much closer to me, but over text he was telling me he was only there this morning and now he went about an hour north. I wasn't happy about this, but this was a really good deal and I didn't want to pass it up. I started asking a bunch of friends if they'd want to come on an adventure with me, really just a way of making the chore of accompanying me for an hour drive seem fun. My friend Martina actually agreed to come on the promise that I buy her food for coming. Melvin sent me the address of a police precinct about an hour away, saying he only does deals in police precinct parking lots to avoid scams. I obviously had no problem with this. In fact, it made me feel a little more confident in this whole thing. I picked up Martina on the way around 8:30 at night, and off we went. Her being in the car and having someone to talk to made the trip more fun. It was also a Friday night, so afterwards we could go out and do whatever we wanted. When I got off the highway, we were about 10 minutes away, and we found ourselves in a very secluded, quiet area. It seemed like a lot of different wooded areas, occasional buildings and houses, and then more woods. We got to the police precinct, and there was no one visibly parked in the parking lot besides empty police cars, of course. We drove around the whole building a couple times and didn't see this Melvin guy who said he was in a black Ultima, so I decided to call him. He picked up and said he's having issues with his car on the side of the road and asked if I could come to him. He sent his location and I checked it. He was on the side of some random road with nothing on either side, and by nothing I mean woods. That's the kind of area we were in. He asked me to come help him jump his car. He had jumper cables. I said, yeah, I guess I can do that. I mean, we drove the hour to get there. I didn't want to just drive another hour for nothing. Martina was shaking her head the whole time I was on the phone. The guy said, "See you soon," and hung up. Martina then basically screamed, "No way, this is sketchy. We're going home." I told her we'll just drive past the location he sent and see what's up. I did agree with her, though. This seemed incredibly sketchy. I just was very upset if we drove 2 hours for nothing. We did drive to the location, and when we got to it, we saw the reflection of a car's front lights coming up on the pitch-black road we found ourselves in. As we got closer, I slowed down, and it was in fact a black car, but we couldn't see anyone inside or outside of it. Mind you, it was very dark, but I feel like we would have seen someone's head on the inside or something. Martina said to just keep driving, and I said I know. It was about the sketchiest thing I'd ever seen. A pitch-black road between 2 patches of woods, no streetlights, no other cars in sight. A pretty convenient place to break down and have someone who's coming with a wad of cash to buy something from you come and meet you. I drove right past it.
Immediately, Melvin starts calling me over and over. I ignored every single call. Then he texted me saying, "I saw you just pass me. Why didn't you stop? Turn around." Ignored. Martina is a very positive person, so she laughed about this whole situation and then said, "Okay, you owe me food." So I looked up the nearest diner and we stopped there for some food. It was a quiet, small diner. We were just about the only people in there, even on a Friday night. The waitress just took our coffee order when a lone guy with his hood up steps into the diner and sits in one of the bar stools. He was wearing a navy blue, dirty-looking hoodie. He glanced over to Martina and I, then looked straight ahead, talking to the lady working behind the counter, apparently ordering a coffee. The man kept glancing at our table like every minute, so I whispered to Martina, "Don't look now, but that guy at the counter might be the Melvin guy." The waitress came with our coffees, asked if we were ready to order. I said, "A few minutes, please." When the lady behind the counter handed that man his coffee, he said, loud and clear, "Thank you, darling." It was that guy from the phone's voice, Melvin, or whatever his real name was. I told Martina, "That's him. We need to pay the check and leave." I waved the server over and whispered to her if we can just get the check. She asked if something's wrong, and I noticed the guy look over as I said this. I said, "Yes, we just needed some coffee for the road." So she got the check. I paid. We downed our coffees and left the building. We got in my car and Martina said, "Oh my God, he's getting up." I looked into the diner and saw that guy leaving towards the door as quickly as possible. I drove us out of that parking lot and sped down the road, and yes, we noticed a black car in the parking lot that could have been the one that we saw on the side of the road. I was driving too fast for him to have caught up. We got back on the highway and I was flying for a while until I got a low tire pressure light come on. I knew instantly he slashed my tire. The PSI was going down fast, so to avoid damage, I pulled to the side of the highway and parked it. I went out to confirm that my tire was slashed. I had to replace the tire with the spare, which took about 15 minutes. The whole thing was a disaster. And if you're wondering, yes, I still got Martina dinner that night. Now, Martina and I look at it as a crazy story that we can look back on and tell people. It's absolutely horrifying, though, how close we were to walking into a trap. I met her on a dating app. Her name was Emily. We had been chatting for a few weeks, just normal texting, light conversation, nothing heavy. She seemed very sweet, easygoing. She invited me to this reunion party at her friend's house, saying it was just a small gathering of people she knew from college. I was intrigued and thought it could be fun. I arrived at the house around 7 p.m. The street was quiet, residential, kind of isolated. The house looked normal from the outside, old but well kept. I knocked, and she came to the door, smiling. She introduced me to a few people inside, friends she said she hadn't seen in years. Everything seemed normal at first. But then I noticed strange things. The people inside were all very stiff, almost robotic in their movements. Their eyes seemed blank, not quite focusing on anything.
Emily kept insisting I meet everyone, pointing out who went to which class, but their reactions were off, like they were pretending to be happy to see each other. I tried small talk, but it felt forced. About an hour in, Emily suggested we move to the backyard. It was a large fenced backyard with dim string lights. When I stepped outside, I noticed a few of the friends standing very still, facing the same direction. One of them turned their heads slowly toward me, and I realized they weren't just awkward. They were watching me too closely, too deliberately. I felt a chill run down my spine.
Emily laughed nervously and said, "Don't mind them, they're just shy." But the way she said it didn't sound sincere. I felt increasingly uneasy. I tried to find an excuse to leave, saying I had an early morning, but she seemed oddly insistent that I stay. Her tone shifted slightly, just enough that it made me uneasy. I decided to step back inside and grab my coat. That's when I noticed the hallway mirror reflecting more people than were actually in the room. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. Then I heard a faint whisper, like multiple voices saying, "Stay, stay." I froze for a moment, trying to convince myself it was imagination. I finally said, "I really should go," and moved toward the door. Emily followed me, smiling, but there was a strange intensity in her gaze. As soon as I stepped outside, the party seemed to go silent, the laughter and music from inside stopping abruptly. I got to my car, doors locked, and started driving away. I didn't look back, but I could swear I saw shadows moving behind the windows, watching me leave. That night, I didn't sleep well. Something about that gathering felt wrong, like everyone there was part of some strange ritual or game. Emily never contacted me again, but the memory of that party and those blank, eerie faces stayed with me for months.
When I was a kid, I lived with my parents in a quiet neighborhood. It was one of those places where nothing ever really happened. People knew their neighbors, kids played outside, and everyone felt safe. That's why what happened one night stuck with me for the rest of my life. I was asleep in my bedroom when I suddenly woke up. I didn't know why at first, but something felt wrong. The house was completely silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy. I remember lying there, staring at my door, trying to listen. After a few seconds, I heard a noise coming from downstairs. It sounded like movement, slow, careful movement. At first, I thought it might be my dad getting up for a glass of water, but something about it didn't sound right. The footsteps were too quiet, like someone was trying not to be heard. I got out of bed and cracked my door open just a little. The hallway was dark. I could see faint light coming from downstairs, from the kitchen. That immediately confused me, because I knew my parents always turned off the lights before going to bed. I slowly walked down the stairs, holding on to the railing. With every step, my heart was pounding harder. When I reached the bottom, I peeked around the corner into the kitchen. There was a man there standing. He wasn't someone I recognized. He was just standing in the middle of the kitchen, facing the counter, like he belonged there. The refrigerator light was on, casting this pale glow across the room. I could see his back clearly. I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't move. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. I remember thinking, this isn't real. This doesn't make sense. Then,
The man slowly turned his head just enough that I knew he had noticed me. That's when fear completely took over. I ran back up the stairs as fast as I could and into my parents' bedroom, screaming for them to wake up. My dad jumped out of bed immediately. By the time he ran downstairs, the man was gone. The back door was open. Nothing was taken. The kitchen looked almost untouched, except for the open fridge. The police came, searched the area, but they never found anyone. They told my parents it was probably someone who thought the house was empty. But I know what I saw. Someone was in our house that night, standing in our kitchen while I was sleeping upstairs. And even now, years later, I still can't walk into a dark kitchen at night without thinking about that moment.
I used to work in home health care, taking care of elderly and disabled patients in their homes. Most of the time, the job was quiet and routine. You go in, help them with daily tasks, administer medication, and make sure they're okay. I had dealt with difficult patients before, but nothing prepared me for Martha. Martha was an elderly woman who lived alone in an old house. From the very first visit, something felt off about her. She was mentally unstable, easily agitated, and would often say things that didn't make sense. Still, I was trained to remain calm and professional no matter what. During my shifts, she would sometimes stare at me for long periods without saying a word. Other times, she would suddenly become angry over small things, like how I placed a glass of water or folded a towel. I tried to brush it off as confusion or dementia. One evening, I was helping her in the kitchen, preparing her food and organizing her medications. The house was quiet, too quiet. I remember feeling watched. I turned around and saw Martha standing behind me, holding a large kitchen knife. She wasn't waving it around or yelling. She was completely calm. Her hand was steady. She just stood there, gripping the knife, staring straight at me. My heart started racing, but I forced myself not to panic. I spoke slowly, gently, asking her what she was doing and if she could please put the knife down. She didn't respond. She didn't blink. She then took a slow step forward. That's when fear fully set in. I carefully backed away, keeping my eyes on the knife, trying not to make any sudden movements. I kept talking to her in a calm voice, telling her everything was okay, that she was safe. After what felt like forever, she stopped moving. Slowly, she turned around and placed the knife back on the counter, exactly where it had been. Without saying a word, she walked back to her room. I didn't finish my shift. I gathered my things, left the house, and reported the incident immediately. I never returned to Martha's home again. To this day, I still think about how quiet she was, how controlled, how deliberate her movements were. If she had wanted to hurt me, she could have. That thought still sends chills down my spine.
When I first moved into that apartment, everything seemed normal. I needed a roommate to split the rent, and Rob had already been living there. He seemed quiet, a little awkward, but harmless. At least, that's what I thought at first. It didn't take long for things to start feeling uncomfortable. Rob was always around, always. If I went into the kitchen, he suddenly needed something from the fridge. If I sat in the living room, he'd sit across from me, not saying much, just watching. At night, I'd hear him pacing outside my bedroom door, slow footsteps back and forth. When I opened the door, he'd pretend he was just heading to the bathroom or grabbing water. It happened too often to be a coincidence. He started commenting on what I wore, asking personal questions, things that crossed clear boundaries. I tried to shut it down, keeping my answers short,
staying in my room as much as possible, but that only made things worse. One night, I noticed my bedroom door was slightly open when I knew I had closed it. Nothing was missing, but the feeling of someone being inside my personal space made my stomach drop. After that, I started placing small objects behind the door before sleeping, just to see if they moved. They did. I confronted Rob about it, casually, trying not to escalate things. He laughed it off, saying I was imagining things, but the smile on his face didn't match his words. It felt rehearsed. Things escalated fast. I started getting messages from unknown numbers, texts that referenced things I had only talked about inside the apartment. My schedule, where I went, who I talked to. I knew it was him. The final straw was when I came home early one day and heard someone breathing inside my room. I froze. When I opened the door, Rob was standing there, claiming he was just looking for something. I didn't ask what. I grabbed my keys and left immediately. I moved out within days. No notice, no confrontation. I blocked his number and never went back alone. To this day, I still think about how easily things could have gone worse. Living with a stranger means trusting them with your safety. And sometimes the real horror isn't ghosts or monsters. It's the person living just a few feet away from you.
Hearing these stories back to back, one thing becomes clear. The scariest moments don't always come from the dark. Sometimes they come from people, from places that should have felt safe, from situations that seemed normal until they weren't. If one of these stories stuck with you, you're not alone. And if you've ever experienced something similar, you already know how real fear can be. Which story disturbed you the most?